On the coast of Northern Ireland, pillars of stone thrust up from the earth in shapes so perfect they seem impossible, and this is the Giant's Causeway, where Irish archaeologists finally opened a moving stone door, and what came out left every scientist present either silent, resigned, or refusing to ever speak on record. A drone operator captured a 20-ton basalt slab swinging open from a cliff face that every geological survey for 60 years had confirmed was completely solid rock, and it stayed open for 11 seconds before sealing shut so cleanly that not a crack, not a seam, not a mark remained. Earlier today, tourists and National Trust rangers saw the legendary fin disappear into a magical doorway within the rock face at the Giant's Causeway, and when archaeologists aimed ground-penetrating radar at that section of cliff the next morning, what they found inside stopped the lead researcher cold for nearly 2 full minutes. She didn't write a note, she didn't adjust a setting, she just stood staring at the screen, and what the radar detected inside that sealed volcanic rock is the reason a formal research paper was suppressed, monitoring equipment was quietly removed, and something locked inside that cliff for 60 million years is no longer there. The man at the center of this story isn't a scientist but rather Kieran Doyle, a 34-year-old electrician from Dublin, who on a Tuesday evening last autumn drove north from the city because the weather forecast promised clear skies and a calm sea, wanting a panoramic clip of the Antrim coast for his Instagram. He'd done this dozens of times: fly the drone out over the cliffs, capture a few minutes of footage, post the best frame, and drive home, as this is one of Northern Ireland's most remarkable and popular sites, a place of science and mythology where people flock each year to see the Giant's Causeway, the Emerald Isle's first World Heritage Site. He wasn't chasing legends and wasn't looking for anything unusual, but what his drone recorded that evening would become one of the most analyzed pieces of amateur footage in recent memory, showing a section of the basalt cliff face moving, not crumbling, not sliding, but moving. A slab roughly the size of a transit van, approximately 20 tons of solid volcanic rock, pushed slowly outward like a door on a hinge, and behind it was total darkness, with the movement smooth, deliberate, almost mechanical, lasting exactly 11 seconds before the stone returned to its original position with surgical precision. No crack, no gap, no seam remained, and if you walked past that cliff face 1 minute later you would never know anything had happened, as Doyle almost didn't post the clip because he thought his drone had glitched or the light was playing tricks, but he re-watched it 6 times on his phone and each time could see the shadows shifting behind the slab. He uploaded it that night and by morning his phone was ringing non-stop with geologists, journalists, and university researchers all demanding the same answer: was it real or was it fake? And one of those calls came from Dr. Sarah Brennan, the scientist who couldn't look away. Dr. Sarah Brennan is a senior geologist at Queen's University Belfast who has studied the Antrim basalt formations for over 15 years and published dozens of papers on volcanic rock structures across the North Atlantic, and when colleagues forwarded her the clip she nearly dismissed it outright but then watched it a second time, then a third. She called Doyle directly and told him point blank that either his footage broke every known rule of geology or it was the most sophisticated hoax she had ever seen, and she drove to the site the next day to investigate for herself. The Giant's Causeway is a stretch of Northern Irish coastline made up of roughly 40,000 interlocking hexagonal basalt columns, the result of a volcanic eruption approximately 60 million years ago when lava at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit cooled into eerily perfect geometric pillars, and local legend says a giant named Finn McCool built them as a bridge to Scotland. In all those centuries of study, all those geological surveys and ground scans, nobody had ever detected a single hollow space inside these cliffs. No ancient text mentioned a hidden chamber, no legend hinted at one, and Dr. Brennan herself had scanned sections of that coastline dozens of times over her career and found nothing but solid rock every single time until Kieran Doyle's drone caught it on camera. Dr. Brennan arrived at the coordinates from Doyle's footage early the next morning in grey weather with wind cutting sideways off the Atlantic, set up her ground-penetrating radar, calibrated the sensors, aimed the antenna at the cliff face, and started the scan, and what appeared on her screen made her stop moving completely. Her field assistant later said he thought the equipment had malfunctioned because she simply wasn't reacting, not writing notes, not adjusting settings, just standing there with eyes locked on the display for nearly 2 full minutes without speaking, and what the radar showed was a massive hollow chamber hidden inside what every geologist had always assumed was completely solid basalt, 12 feet deep and 26 feet wide. That alone should have been impossible, but what the scan detected inside that chamber made the chamber feel like a footnote. 7 tall figures standing upright in the dark, each one between 7 and 8 feet in height, positioned in a precise formation, spaced exactly 4.5 feet apart, every single one facing the stone door. Basalt doesn't form around standing objects as it's cooled lava and not sedimentary rock that builds up over time, meaning the only way those figures could be inside that rock is if they were already in position when the lava was still liquid and still burning at over 2,000 degrees, sealed in there since the eruption that created the Giant's Causeway 60 million years ago. Humans wouldn't exist for another 59 million years, so whatever those 7 things are, they were standing in formation before anything resembling a person ever walked this planet, and the next morning a geophysicist named Dr. Ian Gallagher arrived from Belfast with more advanced scanning equipment specializing in subsurface imaging. Gallagher had mapped underground river systems across northern Europe and worked on deep crust surveys for the Irish government, methodical, professional, and calm with the calm of someone who has looked at underground images for decades and never been surprised. But 20 minutes later his hands were shaking so badly he had to set his tablet down on a rock and step away. He walked in a small circle for a minute rubbing the back of his neck before coming back to look at the screen again, and the higher resolution scan revealed that the 7 figures weren't solid stone but hollow shells. Thin outer casings with empty interiors, like cocoons, like pods, as if something had once been alive inside each one, or maybe still was. The shell material defied identification as whatever it was made of shouldn't have survived contact with molten lava, since nothing organic withstands those temperatures and nothing synthetic should either, not for that duration, not under that pressure. Yet there they were, intact and structurally sound, sealed inside rock that had been liquid fire when the dinosaurs were still dying out. Within 48 hours, government agencies were quietly notified through encrypted emails and closed-door briefings, and an environmental agency team arrived and issued a statement almost immediately claiming the drone footage was a trick of light reflecting off wet basalt, that no chamber existed, and that no anomalies had been detected. But their own lead consultant, Dr. Brennan herself, refused to sign that report. She read the draft statement twice, then pushed it back across the table without picking up a pen, and the room went quiet. Nobody argued, nobody pushed the paper back, and she stood up, gathered her notes, and left. Colleagues on site say she returned to her laptop one final time, pulled up the raw sonar data, stared at it, went completely white, and the following week she submitted a 4-sentence resignation letter whose last sentence read simply, "I have seen enough." 3 words representing her entire scientific conclusion after 15 years studying that coastline. The agency moved fast after that, putting up heavy steel barriers and bright yellow warning signs around the entire section of cliff, with the official reason being coastal erosion and falling rock hazard. Simple and boring, but everyone who had seen those scans knew exactly why that section of cliff was suddenly off limits. Before the team was formally ordered to leave, Dr. Brennan returned to the site one more time 4 days after the original scan to run a comparative scan and confirm the data, hoping everything would look identical and that the first scan had been a glitch. But when the new image loaded on her screen, she grabbed the edge of the equipment case to steady herself. One of the figures was gone and only 6 remained, yet the stone door had not opened even once, as Kieran Doyle had mounted a motion-activated camera aimed directly at the rock face running 24 hours a day for all 4 days and recorded 0 movement on the exterior, not a tremor, not a vibration. Yet inside that locked chamber a 7-foot-tall figure had simply vanished with no dust, no debris, no crack, no tunnel, no trace. The remaining 6 didn't react, didn't scatter, didn't shift into a different pattern or move away from the spot where the 7th had been standing, and just kept standing there in the darkness facing the door, as if the 7th leaving was expected and as if it was simply the first one to go. Dr. Niamh Callaghan, a thermal imaging specialist from University College Dublin, was brought in to check for volcanic heat sources or underground water on a freezing March morning with air temperature at 39 degrees Fahrenheit, and she expected to find a hot spring, a magma pocket, or maybe a buried water channel, something boring, something explainable. Then she aimed her thermal camera at the chamber location and the screen flooded orange and red, because inside the sealed room the 6 remaining figures were radiating heat at exactly 99 degrees Fahrenheit. Not close to human body temperature, but human body temperature itself, the exact internal core reading of a healthy living person. There is no mechanism in geology or thermodynamics that explains how anything stays that warm inside cold stone for even a century, let alone millions of years, as heat dissipates, always radiating outward and fading, and sealed inside freezing basalt surrounded by Atlantic Ocean air. Anything warm should have reached equilibrium with the surrounding rock in days. Not millions of years, just days. Callaghan recalibrated her equipment, swapped the batteries, repositioned the camera, and ran the scan from 3 different angles, and every time got the same result, 99 degrees, steady, unmistakable. And she borrowed a second thermal unit from Gallagher's kit and got the same result again, then returned to her colleagues and asked dead serious if they were playing a prank. When she saw their faces, pale, tight-lipped, nobody laughing, she realized they weren't, packed her gear into her car without another word, and didn't respond to a single email or phone call for 3 weeks, and when she finally did reply it was one line. "I need more time to process what I saw." The team had also installed vibration sensors along the rock face, and what those sensors picked up was the most disturbing detail in the entire story. A rhythmic pulse repeating every 4 seconds, consistent, steady, never varying. And one senior researcher admitted on record that the pattern was indistinguishable from a slow heartbeat. The thermal readings weren't stable either, spiking above 100 degrees with no external trigger before settling back down to 99 degrees, and the fluctuations didn't match tides, weather, or any known geological cycle. As the team ran correlations against barometric pressure, lunar phases, and seismic activity across the North Atlantic, and nothing matched. The heat was behaving autonomously, as if whatever was generating it was responding to something internal, not external, something alive. Every 72 hours the team ran a fresh scan, and every time the situation got worse, as the 6 remaining figures were changing positions, not dramatically but a few inches at a time, barely perceptible between individual scans, but consistently and directionally always moving the same way. They were no longer in their precise military formation but had clustered together and were shifting steadily toward the sealed stone door. The researchers overlaid the positional data from every 72-hour scan onto a single composite image, and when they saw the trajectory, 6 data points on a clear unbroken path toward the exit, nobody in the room said anything for a long time, as these things had been locked inside volcanic rock since before mammals existed, outliving every species, every civilization, every empire that ever rose and fell above them, and for tens of millions of years they didn't move, but now, right now, in our lifetime, they're heading for the door. Over 1 million tourists visit the Giant's Causeway every year, with families walking across those black stones with their children, taking selfies, listening to guides, talking about Finn McCool, with no idea that just 39 feet behind the rock, 6 entities are radiating body heat into the cold stone and inching toward a door that has already opened once. Dr. Brennan, despite her resignation, attempted to go public by spending months compiling the thermal data, heartbeat patterns, positional shifts, and shell composition analysis, writing a formal paper that was peer-reviewed by 2 trusted colleagues who confirmed her methodology was sound, and submitting it to Ireland's Geological Review Board, which rejected it citing faulty equipment, flawed methodology, and insufficient evidence. A colleague on that board contacted her privately afterward on a burner phone and told her off the record that the real reason had nothing to do with her science, but rather that if the public learned that biological heat signatures and rhythmic pulses had been detected inside ancient basalt, it would crack the foundation of everything we think we know about the history of life on Earth, rewriting every textbook and shattering every timeline. In April, all monitoring equipment was quietly removed from the site, and the researchers were told plainly to stay silent or their careers were finished. No publication, no interviews, no social media, Nothing, but they couldn't destroy all of it, as Kieran Doyle still has his original drone footage on 3 separate hard drives in different locations across Dublin, checking them weekly to make sure files haven't been corrupted or remotely wiped. The researchers who worked the site, Brennan, Gallagher, Callahan, and at least 2 others, kept personal copies of everything including sonar data, thermal logs, vibration recordings, positional scans, and timestamped photographs of every equipment readout, all on encrypted drives where no agency can reach without a warrant. The last scan before the equipment was pulled showed the 6 figures still moving, still pulsing, still warm, and the one closest to the door was only a few feet from the stone entrance with its rhythmic heartbeat measurably stronger than the week before, getting louder, getting faster, as if it could sense how close it was to the way out. But the question keeping every one of these researchers awake at night isn't about the 6 still inside, it's about the one that already left. When they first scanned that chamber there were 7 figures and now there are 6, and it didn't break through the stone, didn't open the door, didn't leave a tunnel, a crack, a scratch, or a single grain of displaced dust. It simply wasn't there anymore. So where is it now? Somewhere beneath the Atlantic, drifting through cave systems under the Irish seabed, hidden in an unexplored cavern along the coast, buried inside another cliff face nobody has thought to scan, or somewhere else entirely, beneath a city, inside a mountain, moving through spaces we've never thought to look. The remaining 6 didn't flinch when the 7th disappeared, just kept moving toward the door patiently and steadily as if the departure was expected and as if they're all waiting their turn, and we've spent our entire existence believing we were the first intelligent things to walk this planet, but these figures say otherwise. Something was here long before us, sealed in stone, radiating warmth, pulsing with a rhythm that sounds exactly like a heartbeat, waiting inside that rock while every civilization we've ever built rose and fell on the surface above it, and Dr. Brennan said recently off the record that their heartbeats are getting stronger, their heat signatures are climbing, they're inches from the exit, and the 7th is already out there moving through a world that doesn't know it exists.